I want you to shut off the logical part of your mind.
Okay.
Embrace nothingness.
You got it.
Become like an uncarved stone.
Done.
Bart! You're just pretending to know what I'm talking about.
True.
Well, it's very frustrating.
I'll bet.
When it comes to television shows, The Simpsons is a cultural icon, but what about when it comes to philosophy? Let's look at one episode that to me gives some interesting relevance to the teachings of two great thinkers in Jordan Peterson and Fredrich Nietzsche. In Season 5, Episode 7, we get the episode appropriately titled Bart's Inner Child, which revolves around the simple premise and principle of forgetting everything else and listening to the philosophy of one boy who simply states,
I do what I feel like.
That's marvelous. I couldn't have put it better myself. I do what I feel like. People, this young man here is the inner child I've been talking about.
What?
This honest remark, while being somewhat of a joke, is taken seriously by the rest of the town who are implored by this new moral code to do what they feel like. In the process, the entire town of Springfield becomes an embodiment of Bart as they take up this new profound sense of free-spirited identity. So what does this have to do with Jordan Peterson? Well, Peterson warns about group identity in several ways, but mainly because he asks poignantly who is to decide the borders for the group, since, as he states, the fundamental problem with group identity is that it can be fractionated down to the individual level. In other words, every person is unique and group identity simply cannot capture that variability. But what's interesting is that in Bart's Inner Child, the type of group identity that forms within Springfield is one that occurs when others decide to co-opt someone else's. Here, the danger isn't about losing your identity by joining another group, but the danger in what happens when another group takes over your identity without you knowing it and losing it in the process. As everyone in the town becomes an embodiment of Bart, they take over everything that he usually stands for. At school, he is no longer the class clown, ready to give off witty smart aleck comments because others now beat him to the punch.
The wireless was an invention by Guglielmo Marconi. Who can tell me what his first message was?
I want a change of my name! Oh, jeez. Everybody's a comedian.
As a rebel, he no longer feels like spitting off the overpass because others have taken his patented act of delinquency.
I'm blue. Time for some of my patented spitting off the overpass. Oh, man.
Eventually, he realizes that he doesn't feel happy, but he still doesn't know exactly why. What he doesn't yet realize is that like a drop in the ocean and a sheep amongst a large flock, Bart's own identity has disappeared amongst the entire herd of townsfolk who all act like him, because there's not much, if anything, to differentiate the rest of the town from Bart's identity. To Bart, who is this picture poster for all bad boys of Springfield, that's all he's ever known as an identity, which is how he has always set himself out from the rest. So where does that leave him now that everyone else is also a bad boy? Lost and confused among the pack who all look the same as him.
This is great. Not only am I not learning, I'm forgetting stuff I used to know. And it's all thanks to you, Bart. Yeah, great.
I think this might be a subtle implication that Peterson was trying to warn us about, in that by joining a group to identify with, we not only lose some variability being captured, but the dangers of what can happen when you suddenly leave that group, or worse, that group decides to collectively try to sign you up towards their identity, or worse yet, if that group subtly take your previous identity and even mold it into something new. For Bart, what's occurred leans towards the latter. He never decided to join a group, but through unexpected circumstances became the founding member for another group that collectively stole his identity. But why does he feel like they've taken something from him instead of following his lead and being inspired to forge their own path based on his one and only life principle? Let's now turn to Nietzsche for some answers. Where Bart was the bad boy of Springfield, Nietzsche was one of the bad boys of philosophy. Sure, not in a delinquent teenage skateboarder kind of way, but still in a way that bucked against authority and rebuked at almost every ideal that people held true and dear. He even called Socrates a buffoon who got himself taken way too seriously and called out other philosophers like Kant and John Stuart Mill. But importantly, one of his culminating philosophies was that he rejected and even laughed at the traditional idea of a good, virtuous person. He urged others to forge something of their own ideal, their own free spirit. Someone who rejects traditional morality, virtues, and who embraces the chaos of the world so as to give their own style for their own perspective. Attributes that sound oddly familiar for someone like Bart, right? Well, yes and no. In many ways, Bart is an agent of chaos. He is a rebel, the maker of fart noises and the nightmare of all teachers and babysitters alike. But what's incredibly interesting about Bart is that his personality is also in many ways defined by others. His bad boy persona is largely reactive to everyone else around him. He is crime and the town of Springfield is authority, be it his parents or principal, family or school. Bart's identity has to be the opposition to the authority, because without authority, he becomes lost. He doesn't just continue to do bad things simply because that's inherent within his nature. He won't just rebel and lash out without anyone watching. Rather, it's because people are watching and because people are forbidding him that Bart opposes authority and lashes out. Without this, interesting things happen to Bart because he doesn't know how to act out his life without opposition. Another telling example of this revelation can be seen from Season 5, Episode 19, where Principal Skinner is fired because of Bart. Ned Flanders is called in as a principal, eliminates the tension, and establishes a completely different, almost peaceful minimum level of authority. In turn, Bart actually becomes friends with Skinner and soon realizes that he misses Skinner as principal. He misses him not just as a friend, but more importantly, as an enemy and an authoritative figure.
It's weird, Lise. I miss him as a friend, but I miss him even more as an enemy.
I think you need Skinner, Bart. Everybody needs a nemesis. Sherlock Holmes had his Dr. Moriarty. Mountain Dew has its Mellow Yellow. Even Maggie has that baby with the one eyebrow.
Bart seems to need Skinner not because Skinner is his friend, but because Skinner is his enemy. To him, Skinner is the opposition that Bart needs in his life because this is what gives Bart's life purpose as a rebel. And without this authority, Bart's identity crumbles. Which brings us back to Bart's inner child, as we see one self-help guru, Brad Goodman, convince the entire town to become inspired by Bart's own philosophy to do what they feel like, which is seen as this enlightening code for life.
We can all learn a lot from this young man here, this
Rudiger.
Rudiger. And if we can all be more like little Rudiger...
His name is Bart.
His name isn't important. What's important here is that this lad has fully developed ego integrity with well-defined boundaries. Isn't he?
It's a principle that aims to help the town to let go of their inhibitions that would normally restrict them from listening to their inner child, to that voice inside themselves that tells them deep down what they really want from life and how they can make themselves truly happy. All notions that sound incredibly honorable, but also lead to some interesting results almost immediately. Kent Brockman curses live on TV and sprays his mouth full of whipped cream. Aunt Patty and Selma ride naked on horseback. And everyone takes up Bart's mantra, even at the cost of others. They go against any form of law and order. They rebel and don't do what they are told. They create chaos and, importantly, do what they feel like. The town of Springfield have collectively decided to adopt, or rather co-opt, Bart's bad boy persona and identity, and as Bart watches on, he proclaims boldly to his sister Lisa that he feels like a god.
Lise, today I am a god.
Is that why you're sitting on an ice cream sandwich?
Ew.
But what's interesting is that in doing so, Bart quickly turns from feeling like a god to no longer feeling like himself. Bart soon finds out that having everyone follow his one and only bold commandment isn't all that it's cracked up to be. But not knowing why, where does he go to find the answer? To where most people on the show go to. Lisa.
Lise, everyone in town is acting like me. So why does it suck?
It's simple, Bart. You've defined yourself as a rebel, and in the absence of a repressive milieu, your societal niche has been co-opted.
I see.
Ever since that self-help guy came to town, you've lost your identity. You've fallen through the cracks of our quick-fix, one-hour photo instant oatmeal society.
The answer, as Lisa points out, is that Bart has defined himself as a rebel, and without authority posing against him, or in the absence of his repressive milieu, which means one social environment, Bart's own inherent nature or identity has been co-opted or overtaken by others. This in turn reveals how Bart's identity exists only because of others that oppose him, and not as something that stands by itself, since once all authority disappears, Bart doesn't just continue being the inherent bad boy he's always been. In fact, he's the complete opposite. He feels feels utterly lost because, as Lisa points out, the law and order of authority is the reason why he's a rebel, and without that, he doesn't know what the hell he is. In this, it almost feels like group identity is a double-edged sword. How on the one hand, it's fun and enjoyable to find people who are like-minded and who represent all the similar principles, traits, and codes of life that you like to live by, because more often than not, these people are likely to become some of your closest friends, or at least people you'd want to surround yourself with. But just as easily as it is for you to identify within a larger group, it's also just as quick for you to be lost amongst the crowd of people who all look and act similar to you. And if, like Bart, your identity largely or exclusively exists only because of some other group, when that group turns and transforms to adopt your own personality, you run the risk of actually losing your own sense of identity and who you are. I think that ultimately leads into one of the more subtle lessons from this episode that isn't just about group identity or doing what you feel like, which also harbors at the dangers of hedonism as evidenced by the end of the episode with people forgetting to do their jobs because they didn't feel like it. But more importantly, it seems to me that it's all about the dangers of forming an identity that is based solely off someone else's, which can then take a turn for the worst when that person forms an identity based on yours. To provide more prudent indication of this danger, we can watch Bart's first instinct when faced with this problem as one that he goes to Lisa to ask what to do, which really does give further evidence as to Bart's need to adopt a new identity based off others, because again, he is reacting to someone else and is actively asking to understand what new identity he should become, and moreover, what other people would want from him.
What's the answer?
Well, this is your chance to develop a new and better identity. May I suggest good-natured doormat?
Sounds good, sis. Just tell me what to do.
This is different to being able to create your own identity from scratch, which is something Bart can't do or struggles to accomplish because he cannot forge his own path. He needs others to help him do so, be it from the voice of authority or from the voice of reason.
But does this mean that Bart is living the Nietzschean ideal to a T?
Well, again, yes and no. The ideal Nietzsche famously counseled us on was to go beyond good and evil, and to move beyond valuing things out of this life, and to rather first acknowledge the chaos of existence and the meaningless within it, so as to then, importantly, embrace and be able to forge something meaningful out of it.
This is why Nietzsche
Bucked tradition and morality, why he reviled most things that the majority of us took as important, and why in some ways he was a bad boy of philosophy.
But it's also why we can't say Bart lived the Nietzschean ideal to a T. Yes, Bart does follow Nietzsche's call to action.
And to forget about anything in this world because almost all of it is meaningless to Bart. Plus, we know that Bart likes to buck against tradition and he doesn't care much about anything. He rebels constantly, and while Bart doesn't outright acknowledge the chaos of existence, he does seem to live out a life dedicated to causing chaos simply for the hell of it, and perhaps more poignantly because he wants to cause chaos for everyone else, who as authority figures define his sense of identity and give his life purpose. But where Bart succeeds in going beyond good and evil,
He fails to heed Nietzsche's final ultimate message.
or forging something meaningful out of all this chaos, and to give his own life its true purpose, without the need for others. Bart has no real creative spirit because he cannot even create his own identity without depending on others for guidance. He rejects almost all virtues and code of ethics, bar some moments of genuine human care, but he doesn't bother to then create his own set of principles to live by, aside from one infamous bumper sticker-like slogan. The meaning Bart has in life only exists because of authority and everyone else around him. Like the Joker that needs the Batman and the Batman that needs the Joker, how can you be a hero without any enemies? And how can you be a rebel without any authority? Ultimately,
Bart might be what Nietzsche was trying to warn us about.
a lesson in realizing that while it's important to acknowledge the chaos and pointlessness of everything in life so as to strip away the illusion of artificial and meaningless realities, it's important to then forge a new reality and an original sense of identity that gives life its own purpose without the need for others. Otherwise, all you have left is nothing, and all that you will feel is lost.
Hey, what's the matter, honey?
I don't sleep 'cause when I do, all I dreams of you. And in yours you say you keep falling out. I don't sleep 'cause when I do, all I dreams of you. And in yours you say you keep falling out.
I'm not just a one-line wonder. Did you know that a section of rainforest the size of Kansas is burned every single...
Just do the line.
I didn't do it.
Great material. We'll be right back. Sit perfectly still. Only I may dance.